Welcome back to Bot Thoughts by Amtalk Soft. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're talking about a pattern that has quietly become the default architecture for anyone running language models in production in 2026, the AI gateway. If your team is past the prototyping stage and still calling OpenAI, Anthropic, or Gemini directly from your application code, you are in a tiny minority and probably bleeding money or reliability that you don't need to. Sam is with me today. Sam has spent the last year rolling out gateway layers across half a dozen engineering teams, and he's going to explain why this pattern won, what it does, and how to choose one. Sam, great to have you back.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, the AI gateway is maybe the clearest case of platform layer convergence I've seen in production AI. Think about what happened with REST APIs. The first wave of teams called external APIs directly from their backend got burned on rate limits, retries, auth rotation, cost visibility, and basically everything else, and the industry invented the API gateway as a shared solution. Kong, AWS API gateway, a PIGI, that whole category. Well, LLM calls are APIs. They have the same failure modes plus a few new ones. You have cost per token that varies wildly by model. You have provider outages. OpenAI and Anthropic both had multi-hour incidents this year. You have context window explosions, prompt injection risks, PII leakage, observability that's basically absent if you don't instrument it yourself. So the industry did the exact same thing. A new category appeared called the AI gateway. Light LLM, Portkey, Helicone, Cloudflare's AI gateway, Kong's AI gateway plugin. Different shapes, same idea.
Interesting. So it's basically the same evolution as the API gateway pattern, but specific to LLM traffic. Because I can hear people listening thinking, we already have Kong, we already have a service mesh. Why do we need another proxy?
That's the most common objection, and it's the wrong question. The difference is that a regular API gateway doesn't know what a token is. It doesn't know the cost of a call depends on the model and the input length. It doesn't know that a 429 from OpenAI should route to Anthropic as a fallback. And it doesn't know how to translate a Claude tool call into the OpenAI function calling format when you do. The AI gateway layer is semantic. It understands the payload. That's what makes it worth having in addition to your existing infrastructure, not instead of.
Okay, so the value proposition is that this thing actually speaks LLM. What are the concrete pain points a team hits that pushes them from direct calls to a gateway? Like, what's the incident that finally makes the engineering manager say enough?
4 pain points come up in basically every conversation, always in roughly this order. Cost, usually first, because finance notices a $40,000, $80,000, $200,000 a month LLM bill and wants to know where it's going. Reliability, second, after the first provider outage takes your product down. Observability, third, when a debugging session reveals nobody knows which prompts are slow, which are expensive, or which are failing silently. And security, fourth, when legal or compliance asks if PII is leaving your environment in prompts. These are not speculative. Every team I've seen hits all 4 inside the first 6 months of real LLM traffic. The gateway handles all 4 in one layer.
Let's do cost first, because that's the one that seems to get executives to sign off fastest. You mentioned in the prep notes that you had a team go from $180,000 a month to $40,000. What did they actually do?
So this was a customer support automation product. High volume, English and Spanish, using GPT-4 for everything. They were at about $180,000 a month in OpenAI charges in January. We dropped a gateway in front with 3 changes. First, we cached deterministic calls, product lookups, canned acknowledgements, anything where the same input produced the same output. That killed about a third of the traffic immediately. Second, we routed low-complexity queries to GPT-4o Mini instead of GPT-4o. About 60% of their traffic was where's my order type stuff that Mini handled fine, and Mini was maybe a 15th of the cost. Third, we added a cost cap per tenant per day. By month 3, they were at $40,000 a month with the same response quality metrics. That's not a margin optimization. That's $140,000 a month they now spend on headcount instead.
That's wild, but I want to push back a little. Could they have done the caching and model routing themselves in their application code? Why does this need to be a gateway?
Technically, yes, practically, no. Every engineering team can write a cache. But it becomes a gateway eventually anyway because you need to instrument every call site. You need to rewrite it when you add a new provider. You need to duplicate it across repos and services. And suddenly it's a library instead of a proxy. A gateway is the same logic but centralized. One deploy, every client benefits. That also matters for experimentation. When you want to route 10% of traffic to a new model to see if it performs, you don't want to coordinate a deploy across 15 microservices. You want to flip a gateway config. It's the same argument that convinced teams to put TLS termination, rate limiting, and auth at the ingress instead of in every service. The economics win once you have more than 2 or 3 LLM clients in your stack.
Fair, reliability, second pain point you mentioned. Walk me through how a gateway handles an OpenAI outage, because historically, those have not been graceful.
Right, so the pattern every serious gateway supports now is fallback chains. You declare primary is GPT-4o. If that fails or rate limits, fall back to Claude Sonnet 4.6. If that fails, fall back to a self-hosted Llama 3.3 on Bedrock. The gateway routes in that order and retries automatically. Some of them, like Portkey and LLM, do active health checks so they know before your request hits that the primary is unhealthy and skip straight to the fallback. And the important subtlety is that this has to handle the API format translation, because Anthropic's tool use format is different from OpenAI's function calling format. Good gateways do that translation transparently. Your application keeps using the OpenAI schema, and the gateway rewrites it when routing to Claude. This is the single biggest reason companies move from direct calls to a gateway. One tweet-worthy OpenAI outage becomes a 10-minute elevated latency blip, instead of a 2-hour production incident.
Okay, that alone is probably worth the deploy. Observability, third pain point. What changes there? Because I know teams using LangSmith or LangFuse directly, not through a gateway.
Yep, and honestly, the good gateways integrate with those. The gateway emits a trace per request model, tokens in, tokens out, latency, cost, the prompt, the response, any tool calls, and you pipe that into whatever observability system you already use. LangFuse is the most common open source choice right now. Helicone runs its own dashboard. Portkey has a built-in one, but the point is the instrumentation is automatic at the gateway layer. You don't have to remember to wrap every OpenAI call with a tracing decorator, and the signal you get is much richer than application logs. You can see which prompts cost the most, which ones fail most often, which ones have the worst latency, which users are driving cost, which experiments are moving needles. That's the data flywheel nobody has if they're calling the provider directly.
Security, that was the fourth one. Your blog this week was about MCP servers in production, which has PII considerations too. How does a gateway help with the security side?
The gateway is the natural place to put defensive controls because it sees every prompt going out and every response coming back. PII redaction runs there. Strip email addresses, credit card numbers, internal host names before the prompt leaves your environment. Prompt injection filtering runs there. Heuristics and classifiers that look for known injection patterns before the request is forwarded. Audit logs run there. A compliance-friendly record of every LLM interaction, who initiated it, what was sent, and policy enforcement. Like developers can't use GPT-4 from their laptops, production apps can, but only through these specific API keys. This is a huge piece of what enterprise teams are actually buying when they pick a commercial gateway. LLM and the others give you these hooks, but companies like Portkey and Kong bundle the policy and compliance piece as part of the product. And it ties beautifully into the MCP story. You can put the same gateway in front of your MCP servers to apply the same policies to tool calls.
Great point. Okay, the tool picker question. If I'm a staff engineer at a mid-size company and I need to pick a gateway tomorrow, what am I choosing between and how do I decide?
3 real options worth considering. LLM if you want open source and control. Python-based, self-hosted, supports basically every provider and the community moves fast. The trade-off is you operate it yourself. Portkey if you want commercial with a great UI. They give you the router, the observability dashboard, policy enforcement, guardrails, caching, the whole thing in one box, and it's fair pricing. Trade-off is vendor lock-in on the control plane. Cloudflare AI Gateway if you're already on Cloudflare. Cheap, simple, globally distributed, excellent for consumer-scale apps, less feature-rich than Portkey on policy but very fast. And there's Helicone, which is specifically strong on observability if that's your top pain, and Kong AI Gateway if you're already standardized on Kong for rest. I'd almost always start with LLM for a prototype. One Docker container, point your OpenAI client at it, and you've got routing and fallback in an afternoon. Then if you outgrow the ops burden, move to Portkey or Cloudflare. Don't start with Cloudflare. The policy depth isn't there yet for complex use cases.
You mentioned MCP earlier. The blog we published today is exactly about MCP servers in production. How does the gateway pattern interact with MCP? Because MCP feels like a newer thing, and people might not realize the gateway confront it.
This is one of my favorite emerging patterns. MCP servers expose tools to LLMs. File access, database queries, API calls, every one of those is a security surface. You want rate limits on them. You want audit logs on them. You want to prevent a compromised prompt from firing off 1,000 tool calls. The gateway answer is put the same proxy in front of the MCP traffic. LLM has started supporting this with their MCP proxy feature, and Portkey just released guardrails specifically for MCP tool calls. So the mental model becomes one gateway handling both sides. LLM calls going to OpenAI, Anthropic, whoever, and MCP calls going to internal tools and services. Same observability, same rate limiting, same policy layer. Our blog this week on MCP servers in production goes into the security primitives in more detail. Link in the description.
Nice, last meaty question. When should a team not use a gateway? Because not every call pattern benefits.
3 cases. 1. Toy apps and prototypes. If you're a solo developer making a side project with 50 OpenAI calls a day, a gateway is overkill. 2. Ultra-low latency applications where every added hop matters, like voice AI systems where end-to-end has to be under 300 milliseconds. Some gateways add meaningful latency, and you have to measure. 3. Single provider, single model setups where the value of routing and fallback is 0 because there's nothing to route to. If you're one OpenAI key deep and you have no plans to add Anthropic, the gateway is mostly doing observability and caching, which you might get cheaper from a simpler tool. But the moment you have 2 providers, or you have compliance pressure, or you have a cost problem, gateway.
Okay, takeaways. Biggest 3 points for the engineer listening on a commute right now.
3. 1. If you're past prototyping and still calling OpenAI directly from your app code, you are bleeding money, reliability, and observability you don't need to lose. 2. The gateway pattern is not new. It's the same evolution that gave us API gateways. Same arguments, same answers applied to LLM traffic. 3. Start with LLM or Cloudflare AI Gateway, measure the wins, then decide if a commercial option like Portkey earns its price based on the features you actually need. And read the MCP post this week. The same gateway can front your tool calls, not just your model calls.
Love it. Okay. What should listeners read or watch next if they want to go deeper on this?
Read LLM's documentation. It's unusually good. Walks through fallback configs, caching, cost tracking with real examples. The Portkey blog has great reference architectures. And our own MCP servers in production post that went live this morning covers the tool side of the picture. If you want one hands-on exercise, point your existing OpenAI client at a local LLM Docker container and configure a fallback to Anthropic. You'll understand the whole category in 30 minutes.
Perfect. Thanks, Sam. If this was useful, hit subscribe on Bot Thoughts by Amtalk Soft wherever you get your podcasts. Spotify, YouTube, all the usual places. Leave us a question on the blog comments at AmticSoft, blogspot.com. And if you really want to support the show, buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/AmticSoft. Next episode, we're going deep on the new generation of evaluation frameworks. Deep Eval, Phoenix, PromptFu. how to actually measure whether your AI system is getting better. Until then, keep thinking clearly.